At my sister's wedding reception I gave my name, but the staff looked confused. "Sorry, your name isn't on the list." Shocked, I asked my mother. She smirked. "Did you really think you were invited? Strangers aren't allowed." I smiled calmly. "Then I'll live like a stranger." And I walked away. But during the ceremony, my mother's phone started ringing nonstop. At my sister's wedding reception I introduced myself, but the staff looked puzzled and said, "Sorry, your name isn't on the list." I was shocked. I turned to my mom and with a slight smirk she asked, "Did you really think you were invited? Strangers aren't allowed." I managed a calm smile and replied, "Then I guess I'll live like a stranger," before walking away. My name is Mary Wilson, and I work as a nurse at a general hospital in northern Chicago. From the hospital windows, the city transforms with every season. I especially love winter when a blanket of pure white snow makes the world seem a little kinder. After a grueling 12-hour shift, I dragged my tired self back to my modest apartment. As soon as I opened the door, a small shelf holding my father's photograph greeted me. He passed away from lung cancer 5 years ago, but every time I see that warm smile my chest tightens. "I'm home, Papa," I whispered to his picture. There's no reply, but I like to think his gentle eyes are still watching over me. During his illness I put my career on hold to care for him full-time. While my nursing skills came in handy, his final words still echo, "You need to value your own life more." I believe he understood me better than anyone. After heating up yesterday's leftovers for a simple dinner, I sat at the table and recalled that I'd ignored another call from Mom today. Since Dad died, my mother Eleanor has become increasingly harsh and critical, especially toward me, while being unusually indulgent with my sister Caitlin. That favoritism has been evident since childhood. But when Dad was alive, things were more balanced. Now it's different. "Mary, why are you still wearing such cheap clothes? A nurse's salary can afford better. You're really turning out just like your father, stubborn and self-centered." At least Caitlin is thinking about her future. Mom's barbed comments cut deep every time, often reducing me to tears. I've grown used to it, though it still hurts. Later I sift through the mail on the table. Bills, advertisements, and I hope for a letter from Caitlin. Lately, however, she's been out of touch. After graduating from law school and landing a job at a major firm, most of her college expenses were covered by Dad's insurance money and my savings. I sacrificed my own career for her future, and I don't regret it. I want her to have a wonderful life. A few months back I heard through Mom that Caitlin got engaged to Ryan Johnson, a promising lawyer from the same firm. Mom's tone implied that while Caitlin's achievement was amazing, as a nurse I didn't measure up. Since then I've learned that wedding preparations are underway, yet no invitation has come my way. At first I chalked it up to a mail delay, but as days passed my anxiety grew. Family should mean an invite, right? When I finally mustered the courage to call last week, Mom brushed me off. "Mary, she's busy. Wedding planning is hectic." I tried reaching Caitlin directly, but her messages are rare. The last text I got from her was from 3 months ago. "Thank you, Mary, I was really happy. Ryan loved your present too. Let's meet soon." Since then, soon has remained elusive. Oddly enough, I've built a close rapport with Ryan's family, especially his mother, Barbara. I met her by chance through a mutual friend, and we immediately connected. A former nurse now working for a healthcare nonprofit, Barbara and I share a passion for medicine and often chat over tea. "Mary, you're truly thoughtful. Caitlin always says she's proud of you," she once said, which both surprised and comforted me. After dinner and a quick shower, I prepared for a rare day off tomorrow. I had no special plans, just a hope to relax and perhaps finally resolve the mystery of the missing invitation. Thoughts swirled in my mind. The wedding is next month already. Is there still time to buy a dress? What present would be perfect for Caitlin? I eventually drifted off to sleep with these worries lingering. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up early to the soft, pale orange glow of the sunrise. Today was meant to be Caitlin's big day. Even though I never received an invitation, I clung to the belief that as family, I'd be there. I pulled out the pastel blue dress I'd bought last month, my father's favorite color. It wasn't expensive, but for someone living as modestly as I do, it felt like a small luxury. Standing before the mirror, I carefully styled my hair into an updo and clipped on my father's pearl earrings, a cherished keepsake. "At least today you look decent," I murmured to my reflection, even as memories of Mom's constant critiques echoed in my mind. On the bed lay the gift I had made for Caitlin, a handmade blanket I'd spent 2 months knitting. Crafted from white yarn with tiny blue flowers woven in, it symbolized purity and happiness for her married life. I modeled it after a legendary blanket that Dad once gave Mom when he proposed, a rare, joyful memory from our family. I wrapped the gift carefully, tied a ribbon around it, and wrote a simple card, "Wishing you eternal happiness." Sometimes fewer words speak the loudest. I then called a taxi and headed toward a luxury hotel downtown. Through the car window, Chicago's skyline went about its day as usual, while my heart churned with a mix of joy, expectation, and anxiety. I wanted to celebrate my sister's special day, yet I couldn't shake the worry about not receiving an invitation. The taxi driver announced, "Windsor Hotel." Thank you, I replied. After paying the fare, I took a deep breath and stepped into the grand lobby. Luxurious marble floors, towering chandeliers, and lavish floral arrangements confirmed that Caitlin had chosen only the best. At the entrance of a large hall with a balcony, a young staff member greeted me warmly. Good morning. May I have the name on your invitation? I tried to sound natural despite my racing heart. Mary Wilson, I answered. She scanned the list, her finger tracing down the names, until her expression darkened. I'm sorry, she hesitated, but your name isn't on the list. For a moment I wondered if it was a mistake, an oversight or miscommunication. Could you please check again? I'm the bride's sister, I insisted. The staff member rechecked and even consulted a colleague, her troubled look confirming that this wasn't a simple error. I'm very sorry, Miss Wilson, your name isn't here. A tightening grip formed in my chest as the possibility I dreaded began to sink in. Then a voice from inside the hall said, Mrs. Wilson is already in the venue, referring to my mother. Clutching the gift, I was allowed into the hall. Amid a sea of unfamiliar faces and ornate decorations, I searched for Mom. I soon spotted her, smiling as she chatted with guests and holding a champagne glass. My heart pounded as I approached her slowly. When Mom noticed me, she froze for a moment before quickly plastering on a smile and wrapping up her conversation. Quietly I asked, they told me at reception that my name isn't on the list. Is there a mistake? She looked me up and down as if scrutinizing my outfit, then fixed me with a cold stare. There's no mistake, she said in a low, controlled voice meant only for me. Did you really think you were invited? Outsiders aren't allowed. Her words struck me harder than I'd expected. I thought I was prepared, but nothing could ready me for being excluded from such an important family day. But what about Caitlin? Doesn't she want me there too? I managed to ask, my voice trembling. Caitlin is about to start a happy married life. She doesn't need reminders of failures like you, Eleanor. Her harsh words stung like poison, and just then, I caught sight of a familiar face in the corner. Barbara Johnson, Ryan's mother. She looked as if she'd overheard everything, her expression a mix of surprise and concern. Taking a deep breath, I swallowed my tears. I couldn't show weakness in front of Mom. In a quiet, resolute voice I said, I see. Then I guess I'll live my life as an outsider too. I placed the gift on a nearby table. This is for Caitlin. Would you please give it to her, if it's not too much trouble? As I turned to leave, Barbara gently grasped my arm. Mary, wait, what's going on? Caitlin said she wanted you to come. She mentioned you just last week. I was confused by the conflicting stories from Barbara and Mom. Barbara, this is a family matter. Please don't interfere, Mom snapped in a stern tone. It's all right, I interrupted softly. Today is my sister's big day. I don't want to cause any problems. Barbara looked like she had more to say, but I squeezed her hand, smiled gently, and simply said, thank you, before leaving. Stepping outside the hotel, the sky was clear, yet my heart was still in turmoil like a raging storm. I flagged down a taxi and said, take me home. The driver, noticing the tears I was trying to hold back, drove in silence, not prying further. Meanwhile, inside the venue, the wedding preparations reached their final moments. Music filled the hall and guests began to take their seats. Just as the announcement for the ceremony was made, Mom's phone began ringing nonstop. At first, she tried to ignore it, but when the calls wouldn't cease, she offered an apologetic look to those nearby and stepped outside. Outside, she heard Caitlin's excited voice. Where's Mary? I wanted to see her before the ceremony. For a moment, Mom seemed lost for words. She mumbled something about Barbara having seen me at the venue just moments ago. Then, she noticed Barbara talking to Caitlin with a serious expression, as if revealing the truth. When Mom returned, the ceremony had already begun. Caitlin, dressed in a breathtaking wedding gown, made her entrance, though her face betrayed a hint of hesitation. As the priest continued with his words, Caitlin suddenly scanned the room and stood up. Where's Mary? She called out, her voice trembling with a mix of anxiety and confusion. The hall fell silent. Despite the beauty of her pure white gown, her distress was unmistakable. At that very moment, the groom Ryan stood up. Looking confused, someone whispered to Caitlin, Kate, what's wrong? Another voice urged, let's continue the ceremony. Wait, Ryan, Caitlin shook her head, adding, Mary, my sister, is not here. A small murmur spread among the guests while the priest glanced around nervously, unsure of how to proceed. Barbara then stood up with a stern expression, as if about to deliver serious news. Caitlin, Mary was here, she began carefully, stealing a brief glance at Eleanor. She was told her name wasn't on the guest list, so she wasn't allowed in. The color drained from Caitlin's face and she trembled, asking, Mom, what does this mean? Mary is my sister. Why did you remove her name from the list? Eleanor, clearly uncomfortable under the eyes of everyone around, shrank back and began offering excuses in a low voice. Caitlin, this is your special day. If Mary came, she'd just try to steal the spotlight as always. I only wanted to keep the focus on you. Anger flashed in Caitlin's eyes. That's not true. Mary has never been jealous or tried to upstage me. She's always supported me. Eleanor scoffed. You just don't understand her true nature. I was only trying to protect you. As the murmuring in the room grew louder, Ryan looked at his parents with confusion. At that moment, Robert Johnson, a tall, dignified man and a senior partner at the law firm, rose from his seat next to Barbara. In a low but powerful voice he said, "What is the meaning of all this? We thought today was a celebration of two families coming together, not a day of exclusion." He fixed his gaze on Eleanor and added, "I never imagined we'd welcome our children into a family that would do this. I cannot be associated with those who shut out their own kin." The room fell into tense silence. Caitlin covered her face as the hem of her wedding dress cascaded onto the floor, making her appear both beautiful and heartbroken. Ryan rushed to her side, gently whispering, "It's okay, I'm here for you," and took her trembling hand. "I'm going to call Mary," he added. Through tears, Caitlin pulled out her smartphone and dialed Mary's number repeatedly, but the ringtone continued without answer. "She's not picking up," she muttered desperately. Ryan squeezed her hand. "She's hurt, she just needs time." After one more try with no response, Caitlin exhaled deeply and addressed the gathered guests. "Everyone, I'm truly sorry that things have turned out this way today," she began, her voice shaking before gradually regaining strength. "There's something I hadn't realized until now. Mom has been keeping Mary away for months. She wanted me to believe that all my success was mine alone, but I wouldn't be where I am today without Mary. I went to law school because Mary helped with the tuition. She even put her career on hold to care for Dad and support my dreams. When I had my first job interview, she bought me a suit and practiced with me until I got it right." Sympathetic looks spread among the guests as Caitlin continued. "I even wanted Mary's advice when choosing this dress, but Mom said Mary was too busy." Fresh tears streamed down her cheeks as Barbara stepped forward and said gently, "Mary is a wonderful person. Every time we meet, she tells me how proud she is of you, and she always asks about your wedding plans." Caitlin's face crumpled further. "I've taken everything Mary did for me for granted." Then Ryan stepped forward with a decision in his voice. "Everyone, I apologize, but we're postponing today's ceremony." A mix of surprise, nods of understanding, and quiet murmurs spread through the hall. "A wedding can only be complete when the entire family is together," he declared. Caitlin looked gratefully at Ryan and squeezed his hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Robert then addressed the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, despite many of you traveling from far away, please understand our decision." Turning to Eleanor with a stern expression, he added, "I cannot trust someone who doesn't value family. How could you do something so despicable?" Eleanor was left speechless, her face pale and hands trembling as the false image she built crumbled in an instant. Caitlin lifted the hem of her wedding dress while clutching her smartphone. "I need to find Mary. I need to apologize to her." Ryan nodded, draping his jacket over her shoulders. "Let's go together." As they walked toward the venue doors, Caitlin paused and looked back at Eleanor. "Mom, I can't easily forgive what happened today, but you are my mother. I hope one day we can reconcile." Eleanor could only cry silently as Caitlin and Ryan left the venue behind. Outside, Robert and Barbara handled the guests. Barbara called out, "Caitlin, when you find Mary, tell her we send our love too." Later, as a beautiful sunset spread across the sky, Caitlin took a deep breath and said, "I know where Mary is," pulling Ryan toward the car. Mary's apartment was on the third floor of an old building in North Chicago, the same place she'd once shared with her father, and where she now clung to memories, watching a small park from her window as the seasons changed. After the wedding debacle, Mary sat alone on her sofa by the window in her formal attire, ignoring her constantly ringing phone. She stared out at the park where children played and parents smiled. A scene that once embodied the warmth of family. "Family," Mary whispered softly, feeling a deep emptiness inside. "I guess I'll live as an outsider," she thought as she got up to remove the dress she might never wear again. Around 7 p.m., a persistent knock echoed at her door. Mary didn't respond at first, hoping the knock would eventually stop, but soon voices could be heard. "Mary, please open the door." It was Caitlin's voice. Mary hesitated. "Mary, we're here. Let us talk to you," came Barbara's gentle request, followed by a male voice, probably Ryan's. Taking a deep breath, Mary approached the door and looked through the peephole. She saw Caitlin in her wedding dress, eyes red and swollen, with Ryan, Barbara, and Robert waiting outside. Slowly, Mary opened the door. Caitlin rushed in and clung to Mary, sobbing. "I'm so sorry, Mary, I'm so sorry." Mary, surprisingly calm, asked, "Caitlin, what about your wedding? Why are you here?" Ryan stepped forward quietly. "We postponed the ceremony. We felt that without you, it just wouldn't be complete." Mary was left speechless as Ryan's parents stood nearby with gentle smiles. Barbara softly added, "May we come in?" Mary nodded silently and led them into her modest, warm living room decorated with photos of her father, well-worn medical books, and cherished novels. Still crying, Caitlin grabbed Mary's hand. "I had no idea you were kept off the list. Please believe me, we learned the truth at the venue." Robert continued in a calm yet firm tone. "Your mother, Mom, removed my name. Mary replied flatly, I'm not surprised. But why? A confused Caitlin asked, why would she do that? Mary sank onto the sofa and shrugged wearily. Mom always loved you more than me. I was just seen as a nuisance. Caitlin's voice rose as she trembled while taking out her smartphone. There's even worse, she said, showing Mary old text messages from Eleanor to Caitlin from 2 years ago. One read, Mary can't come to your graduation, she's too busy. Don't worry, we'll celebrate just us. Mary's eyes widened. That's a lie. I took time off work that day, but Mom said you didn't want me there. Another message read, no birthday present from Mary. She's always too busy. Mary's voice trembled as Barbara quietly explained that there were letters and gifts from Mary that had been deliberately withheld to destroy the sisters' relationship. Why didn't I notice? Caitlin whispered, blaming herself. I remember everything you did for me, helping with law school tuition, that suit for my first job interview, caring for Dad during his illness. It was all thanks to you. Tears welled up in Mary's eyes as a mix of anger, sadness, relief, and love surged within her. But why would Mom go so far? She asked softly. Ryan spoke quietly. I think Mom wanted all the credit for Caitlin's success. Your very existence threatened that story. She was crying when we left the venue. Caitlin confessed. Honestly, I don't know if I can ever forgive her. Silence filled the room as Mary stared out the window, lost in thought. Then she slowly lifted her face and said, You are my sister, that will never change. What Mom did may take time to forgive, but it isn't your fault. Caitlin's face softened with relief as she embraced Mary tightly, as if reclaiming the bond they once had. Ryan stepped forward and said gently, Mary, we want you at our wedding, the postponed one, of course. Mary smiled. A genuine smile for the first time in ages. Barbara placed a warm hand on Mary's shoulder and said kindly, You're already part of our family. Robert shook his head and said, Let no one keep you away anymore. In our home, family is everything. That's what matters most. That night, we talked until late, filling a gap that had grown over the years. We reminisced about the past. Mary recalled memories of our father, and Caitlin laughed about childhood adventures and the fun times we shared. Remember that summer when Dad took us to the lake? Mary said nostalgically. Of course, I nearly drowned and you jumped in to save me. Caitlin laughed. Dad even called you our family hero. Later, Barbara and Robert prepared to leave. We'll come again tomorrow, Barbara promised, giving Mary a tight hug. Caitlin and Ryan were about to follow, but Mary stopped them. Why don't you stay here tonight? I can set up the sofa bed. The following Saturday, Caitlin and Ryan's wedding was held in a small garden with only close friends and family. This time, Mary stood proudly by her sister as maid of honor, and an invitation had even been sent to Eleanor. At first, Mary hesitated, but then she decided, she's our mother. We can't cut her off completely. As Barbara had said the day before, kindness is your most wonderful quality. The day before the wedding, Eleanor visited Mary's apartment. Looking older and worn out with deep fatigue under her eyes, she struggled for words. Come in, Mary said quietly, leading her mother into the living room. I've come to apologize. Eleanor's voice was small and trembling. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I'm sorry. Mary understood that Ryan's parents had urged Eleanor to come, worried she might miss her son's wedding. Still, it was the first time her mother had ever apologized. It will take time, Mary admitted softly. But tomorrow is Caitlin's special day. Let's be at peace for her sake. Eleanor nodded silently. On the wedding day, while Caitlin helped with the final touches, Mary prepared a special gift. A keepsake from Dad, a beautiful sapphire necklace. Caitlin, this is for you, Mary said as she handed it over. It's Dad's keepsake. He always wanted you to wear it. Overwhelmed, Caitlin was too moved for words. She simply embraced Mary. Dad would be so happy, Mary whispered. The ceremony unfolded in an atmosphere of love and reconciliation. Eleanor sat quietly, watching her daughters. Mary adjusted the hem of Caitlin's dress, and they exchanged warm smiles. I'm so glad you're here, Caitlin whispered. I'm not going anywhere, I promise, Mary replied. One winter, a year later, Chicago was blanketed in snow. After finishing a long night shift at the hospital, Mary trudged back to her apartment. When she opened the door, the warm glow of the Christmas tree lights filled the room. Over the past year, life had changed significantly. Weekly lunches with Caitlin, sometimes in the bustling hospital cafeteria, sometimes at our favorite downtown spot, had become a cherished routine. We caught up on life and shared memories as if we were making up for lost time. Remember that doll you wanted for Christmas when you were 5? Mary asked at lunch last week. Caitlin laughed nostalgically. I was waiting by the door for Dad to come home, and you joked that Santa was busy, so Dad had to bring it in. In reality, Mary had secretly used her own savings to buy that doll. To Caitlin, her smile was the greatest treasure. On the table lay a recent invitation from Caitlin. Merry Christmas. Please spend it with us at our home this year. A handwritten note read, I have something very special to tell you. At lunch, Mary had sensed something was different. Caitlin had hinted that she was pregnant. There had been no official announcement yet, but Mary couldn't miss that special glow whenever she gently placed her hand on Caitlin's stomach. Meanwhile, my relationship with Mom, Eleanor, remained complicated. Since the wedding, she had distanced herself and chosen to live alone. Once a social butterfly, Eleanor soon found herself ostracized when her manipulations and lies became known among her friends. Occasionally, Caitlin would update me about her, but I avoided meeting her directly. Mom is trying to change, Caitlin had said last month, but it's not easy. Eleanor had tried to contact me several times, yet her messages and calls were always brief and formal. Her pride wouldn't let her share genuine apologies. On Christmas Eve, after a short shift at the hospital, Mary sat on her sofa gazing at Dad's photograph. "Merry Christmas, Papa. This year will be a little different," she murmured. Then the doorbell rang. Checking the clock, 10 p.m. She wondered who could be visiting at that hour. Through the peephole, she saw Eleanor standing there in a snow-covered coat, holding a small bag. Her face was a mix of anxiety and determination. Hesitantly, Mary opened the door. Eleanor's voice was soft and trembling. "Do you have time to talk?" Mary paused before nodding. "Come in, it must be cold out." Brushing off the snow, Eleanor stepped inside. Once dignified, she now looked like a tired, middle-aged woman. Mary took her coat and led her to the living room. "Would you like some tea?" she offered. "Thank you," Eleanor replied softly. They sat together in silence as snow continued to dance outside the window. Finally, after several pauses, Eleanor took a deep breath and began. "Mary, I was a terrible mother. I'm truly sorry for hurting you." Tears welled in her eyes. "I justified my actions and blamed others, but the truth is, I was wrong." Mary listened quietly before speaking. "You always sacrifice for the family, taking care of Dad, paying Caitlin's tuition. You were a much better parent than I ever was." Eleanor's voice shook, reluctant to admit her own failures. She then placed the small bag on the table. "This isn't a gift. It's something I should have returned." When Mary opened it, she discovered a tiny jewelry box. Inside lay diamond earrings that had been passed down from our maternal grandmother. After Dad died, Eleanor had claimed they were lost. "These belong to you, I took them," she confessed, lowering her gaze. "I'm truly sorry." After a long silence, Mary said quietly, "Forgiveness isn't easy. I've been hurt by your words for a long time. But maybe step by step we can rebuild our relationship." A small light of hope appeared in Eleanor's eyes. "Tomorrow there's a Christmas dinner at Caitlin and Ryan's home. Will you come?" Mary asked. Eleanor looked surprised. "You're inviting me?" "Yes, because we're family," Mary replied, simply adding. "And besides, Caitlin has some special news." The next day, on Christmas Eve, Caitlin and Ryan's home was filled with warm light and laughter. Barbara and Robert had also arrived to help with the final preparations in the kitchen. When Mary arrived, Caitlin rushed out to greet her. "Mary, you came." "Of course you did." Mary laughed. "Oh, Mom is coming too?" Caitlin asked, pleasantly surprised. "Really? That's wonderful." Ryan even set an extra place at the table. A few minutes later, Eleanor appeared with a few small gifts. She greeted everyone with a nervous smile, looking especially humble in front of Barbara and Robert. Barbara offered her a warm cup of cinnamon tea, saying, "We all make mistakes. What matters is the courage to admit them and try to change." Before dinner, Caitlin and Ryan gathered everyone for a special announcement. "Everyone, we have wonderful news," Ryan declared proudly. "Caitlin is pregnant. She'll be a mom in 5 months." Amid cheers and congratulations, Caitlin took Mary's hand. "Mary, I want you to be the godparent. Having someone with your kindness and strength by our child's side would mean everything." With tears in her eyes, Mary replied, "I'd be honored. I'll love this child with all my heart." Eleanor sat quietly, tears glistening in her eyes as Caitlin continued. "Mom, I want you involved in our child's life as a grandmother. The past is behind us. The future is what matters." After dinner, Mary found herself alone by the window, watching the gently falling snow. Eleanor approached softly. "What a lovely family," she murmured. "It's thanks to you, Mary." Mary smiled and said, "It's thanks to all of us. Family isn't built by one person, it takes every one of us. In the end, your patience and love broke the cycle of hurt and sparked a new beginning. As Dad once taught her, the power of forgiveness is immeasurable." Eleanor, after a long journey, was beginning to understand the pain she'd caused, and was now making daily efforts to become a true mother. "It isn't easy," she admitted, "but I'm on my own path to restore our family bonds." That night, when the whole family gathered for a commemorative photo, Mary whispered to her father's photograph, "Can you see, Papa? We've become a family again. In a different way, but still a family." Outside, the snow continued to fall gently. The wounds of the past weren't completely healed, but a new light of hope shone quietly over our reborn family.